Alright, what's up guys? I hope you're doing well. James here from jamesforsythe.com. So we have some interesting developments in the CBDC realm, right? And so beforehand, everything I've found has basically just been from like a monetary point of view, but we're actually going towards more of a fiscal point of view. And what I mean by that is instead of like kind of your monetary scientists and that sort of stuff, researchers from monetary entities like banks, BIS, so on, whatever, we're also seeing them from governments themselves. And what I'm going to talk about specifically is the White House in this respect. So I found I guess it's a blog post. It seems like it's a blog post for the White House, and it's on the OSTP, which is like the Office of Science and Technology Policy, I believe. That's what it stands for. Yeah. Basically going and more or less endorsing CBDCs, right? And there's actually quite a few things that's going to be, it's kind of taking my attention away from what I had planned for the channel, and we're going to focus more on this because I think it's more pressing, we'll say, and you'll understand a lot more when we get into it. So to kind of go on through the blog post, so we have, if the US pursued a CBDC, there could be many possible benefits, such as facilitating efficient and low-cost transactions, fostering greater access to the financial system, boosting economic growth, and supporting the continued centrality of the US within the international financial system. However, a US CBDC could also introduce a variety of risks, as it might affect everything ranging from the stability of the financial system to the protection of sensitive data. All things I've talked about in abundance at this point on this channel. I have a whole playlist for it, for CBDCs in general, where I've literally gone through a lot of the kind of seeming initial research, right? So specifically what I'm talking about, there was a series of papers produced by the BIS and a group of central banks from around the world, including the Federal Reserve, specifically the Board of Governors, and then you have like the Swiss National Bank, Bank of Canada, Bank of Japan, and so on, right? They were all a part of that, going through different aspects one by one, right? So that's all a thing. If you kind of need more of an introductory kind of, I don't want to say course because it's not a course, it's just a series of videos that I just put out there, but going over that specifically. And in those I link the actual papers themselves, as always. So, but to continue on with this and how it applies to the White House, right? And so this brings up a recent executive order, 14067, basically ensuring responsible development of digital assets. And I forgot when Biden signed this, but it wasn't too long ago. I don't know about you guys, but I keep getting the ads from James Rickards about this executive order whenever I happen to watch YouTube. That's one of the main ads that pops up all the time for me. But basically, this executive order directed the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the OSTP, in consultation with other federal departments and agencies, to submit to the president a technical evaluation for a potential US CBDC system, right? And so basically they published a report, which they link in here, and I'm probably going to go through in depth of that actual report itself and kind of go through it as well on here. So basically it essentially lays out policy objectives for a potential US CBDC system and analyzes key technical design choices for a US CBDC system, right? And so the report also estimates the technical feasibility of building a CBDC minimum viable product and describes how a US CBDC system might affect federal operations, right? And so these are all things that I've touched on a little bit more nuanced in separate videos in the past. And again, those are all in that playlist. I'm kind of just using that. At this point, it's basically just a library that I keep adding to as I find more things and kind of trying to attack concepts from different angles. Basically, how a CBDC system would be implemented is rather nuanced, or can be, especially depending on how they want to do it. Is it a tiered system? What exactly are they doing with the actual asset itself, say like the coin, or is it like more of the system? Which kind of goes between the whole advent of FedNow and that sort of thing, how it could be applied. Again, I did that in separate videos, and so those would be in various playlists around at this point. But to stay more on topic and not get ahead of myself, so basically the objectives state that the US CBDC system should expand equitable access to the financial system, preserve the role of physical cash, and only collect data that is strictly necessary. So I'll leave that up to you guys to believe on the whole data part specifically, and also kind of at this point it's kind of just their word for it. Again, I don't really get too political on here. It's just kind of, I try to look at these at face value, and then throughout time and more research is when I kind of develop an opinion, especially when it comes to this kind of stuff. But the biggest thing that came out to me was this next statement, that there are 18 different technical design choices in the report. So it seems like they are going full on, like trying to understand every little thing, it seems, from this. And again, I don't know exactly what the nuance is yet with each one of those things, but just looking through some of the table of contents for the actual PDFs that they have themselves, like transaction privacy, signatures, modeling the data, fungibility, holding limits, like adjustments on balances. That sounds promising to see in the table of contents, but we're just going to leave that until that'll probably be its own video. At least finding out what the hell they're talking about. But yeah, so I mean, full on evaluation for a possible system, and that is a 60-page PDF. Then you have policy objectives, design choices, like they're actually putting stuff out there. So that's kind of why I'm wanting to look more towards that, right? And actually kind of understand, okay, before it was like a generalized, what are they thinking about on kind of a global scale in terms of, that was very general research, right? And this was published, I think the first one was in the very beginning of 2020, was the first discussion paper for that collaboration series with the BIS and so on. But again, sticking to the blog post. So it seems like, or at least at face value, like I said before, that they want to make the CBDC a monetary instrument quoting like cash, right? And that's me quoting them. By that, it basically seems like it's just going to be like a Federal Reserve note, but digital. So it kind of reminds me a lot of bank reserves, and basically making bank reserves legal tender. And I think I made a video on that as well. Actually, I know I made a video on that as well, but that was more me just in my initial thoughts while I was thinking it through, right? So that being said, bank reserves don't really work like people think they do. They're not like, you know, if you just deposit $1,000 in the bank holds $100 or whatever the reserve requirement requires in reserves. And that's not how they work anymore, right? That's rather antiquated. And if you look into like the Eurodollar system, shadow banking, that sort of thing, and I'm going to cite Jeff Snyder on that, Eurodollar University, to go look at those, because he is very well versed in it. He's probably because that's something I've been trying to understand for quite some time and been studying, and by quite some time. I'm obviously not in my 40s or anything, so take that with a grain of salt. But it's something that I'm very interested in and actively studying, right? And he is one of the most, I think, open about what he knows and goes rather in depth with what he knows. And it's one of those, I have a high degree in confidence he actually knows what he's talking about, just from paying attention to him for a decent amount of time already. But to continue on with CBDCs, and after that, there's a whole agenda too. So to quote exactly from the blog post, following a recommendation in the report, OSTP and the National Science Foundation will lead an interagency effort to develop a national digital assets research and development agenda. So this agenda will place a high priority on advancing research on topics like cryptography that could be helpful to CBDC experimentation and the development at the Federal Reserve, right? So there's a whole R&D agenda for it, right? And then again, that's not necessarily saying like, you know, oh, conspiracy agenda type thing. That's just, I mean, you kind of need a plan when you're researching anything to begin with, or at least a rough plan as you go further into it, kind of have some sort of direction, but just also pointing that out, right? They're also looking at it's going to be implemented, or not implemented. I don't want to give that kind of connotation towards it, but it seems like they're looking into having this a part, or at least this research a part of the 2024 budget, the fiscal 2024 fiscal year budget, right? So there's that as well. And they kind of close out with the American people deserve to fully benefit from technological possibilities like a US CBDC while being protected from the harms it could bring, right? And that's kind of just looking at it on face value. Again, without looking into those PDFs that they have and all the postings, it seems like there's about 100 pages that I found so far in total, spread between 3 different PDFs. But before reading that, I'm not going to show conviction. I've kind of let my opinions be known slowly but surely throughout the series that I've done on CBDCs on how they would actually, whether or not they're a good thing. And there are some benefits, but after a risk reward analysis or a cost benefit analysis, I think that's up to you to decide for yourself, which is why I kind of look into each one individually, or just trying to understand it, right? But anyways, trying not to go down a rabbit hole, I'm going to leave this one here. I'll put as end cards, I will put the playlist for the CBDC stuff and a couple other CBDC related videos just to kind of help you guys, or put it out there so you guys don't have to look for it mostly. But that's out there, and just really trying to understand this sort of stuff and get the information out there and kind of create discussion about it in general. That's kind of the whole point. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to leave this one here. I hope you guys enjoy some of the other videos, and I'd love your guys' feedback on them. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll see you on the next one.